Hello, neighbors and friends. I'm William Brian Wardman with the Jefferson Parke Neighborhood Association. Today, May 31st, 2023, we have Speaker Robert Martwick, Senator of the 10th District of Illinois, to go over what has been going on in Springfield.
Our state senator, Senator Robert Martwick, is here to speak to us, and I always appreciate it when our politicians come out, including you, Senator. I think it's wonderful you brief us what's going on. You can sit, you can stand, whatever works for you. Good to see you, by the way.
Good to see you too. I'll stand. I like to stand.
Cool.
So good evening, everyone. It's great to be here with you all today here at JPNA. Hope you're all doing well. Getting a good start to the summer. Weather's nice, right? So we just finished up in Springfield, and you know, as always, it was typically a long and rather complicated session, but we finished and we did some really good things. I'm happy to come here and fill you in on what's going on in Springfield. So just a little bit of a background for those of you who are not aware. Our session starts every year in January. We have a budget deadline of May 31st. And as many of you know, in years past, that hasn't always been something that we were able to meet. We had budget impasses for a lot of years under the prior governor, 2.5 years without a budget. But that's when our regular session happens. On May 31st, we're supposed to, like I said, in most years that I've been there, we haven't, but we're supposed to adjourn. And then what happens is there's certain time frames. So there's 30 days from the time that we adjourn for us to do whatever it is they do in the General Assembly to package all those bills and send them to the governor. Then the governor has 60 days to review all those bills and act on them, right? So he can sign them, or he can veto them, or he can amend them. And then he has 30 days to send them back to us, and then we have 60 days to act on them. And that is called veto session. So we'll go back in late October and early November for a couple of weeks, and we will act on those things. Now, we're not limited in veto session to only acting on those things. There are bits of legislation that are out there that didn't get finished that can be resurrected in veto session. There are different rules once we're past May 31st. We need a higher vote threshold to pass certain pieces of legislation. It's not everything, it's select things. But that's generally how it works. And then once we finish veto session, we're done, and then we come back in January and we start all over again. So what happened this year? Well, what I want to do is I want to run you through just a couple pieces of legislation, and I'll tell you why. I'm not going to give you a big, long dissertation on legislation. And then I want to talk to you about the budget, okay? The reason that there's not a whole lot to talk about in terms of legislation is that over the course of the last 5 years, a lot of the really big legislative issues that have popped up nationwide or statewide have sort of been decided. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. We get those big controversial hot button issues kind of off to the side. We come up with some sort of solution for the time being. And then we see how things go and we come back and amend them. But this year we were kind of really more focused on sort of the details and the nuts and bolts of government, which is not a bad thing. It's good to have our attention where it matters. I want to talk to you about just a few pieces of legislation that I think are interesting. And I wrote them down here in the order that I like them. But yeah, I'll just go through it. So anybody who knows me and knows my career, I've kind of become the pension guy in Springfield. Pensions are sort of an ongoing problem in the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago. And government solves problems by spending money, right? We find a problem with we can't hire enough police officers. We put money into officer recruitment and retention. We might increase their pay to encourage people to do a tough job. Same thing with teachers. So government identifies problems and, you know, we have a homeless crisis. Well, let's get intervention. That costs money. Let's hire people to do it. That costs money. Let's find some sort of housing intervention, affordable housing that we can, you know, find a place to house people to give them security and programming so they can get to the next step. And, right, that costs money. So that's what we do. Pensions are supposed to be retirement security for our dedicated public servants. police officers, firefighters, teachers, frontline government workers. But unfortunately, because of the irresponsibility of past generations, they've turned into this massive debt problem that we owe. And figuring out ways to address that and move forward has kind of been a focus of my career, because I quickly realized that all the things that I wanted to do, I was never going to be able to do if I didn't sort out those pension problems. And I think many of you probably know, despite the gray here and the gray here, I got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I want to leave a better state to them than was left for me. And so figuring out ways to solve that debt problem responsibly so that they don't have to do the things that we've had to do. Cut spending on education, cut spending on higher education. Those sorts of things really hurt our society, but we had to do it. We had no choice. That's the situation we were left in. So I spent a lot of time working on pensions. I don't want to bore you with them, but I'll tell you a couple of things I've been working on. Number one, first and foremost, a really good bright spot, Cook County pensions, right? So here's the kicker. Who owes money on the pension systems? Government, right? Newsflash, who's government? We are. Not me, I'm the representative of government. We are the government. That debt's on us. So here's the high spot, right? We have certain governments that have been particularly irresponsible over the years, City of Chicago. But Cook County, 10 years ago, Toni Preckwinkle came in and she said, what's going on with our pensions? Well, they're going down. Well, how much are we putting in? Well, we're putting in the maximum that the law requires. Is that enough? Not nearly. But it's the maximum the law requires. And she said, that doesn't make any sense. Yep, but that's all you can put in. The law says that much and no more. And she said, but that's irresponsible. That's going to build a debt. It's going to be on the backs of the taxpayers. And so she went around the law to create an intergovernmental agreement with her pension fund and started putting additional monies into the pension fund. And her pension fund, the Cook County Pension Fund, which we are all responsible for, their funded balance has been growing over the course of the last decade. Where many other pension funds have been even or dropping, theirs has been growing. 5 years ago, Toni Preckwinkle came to the General Assembly and said, I'm doing this because I choose to. Let's make sure whoever follows me does it because they have to. And so she proposed some legislation. You would think being fiscally responsible is an easy thing to do, but remember what state we live in here. So there was pushback from different groups about what she wanted to do, how she wanted to do it. Well, we agree, we want you to put more money in, but we want you to do it this way and not that way. Well, I'm here to say that after 5 years of negotiation, we passed legislation that will guarantee that the Cook County government will now be required to continue to do what they were already doing. So it's no new taxes, it's just going to emblazon that. And they are on this path where they are going to get to fully funded, and it's one less debt problem that's going to be on the backs of us and our children. And I think that that's a really good thing. So, so that got done. I'm very happy about that. There were some other pension measures. I mentioned Chicago. Chicago has been a particularly bad actor in the pension world, and unfortunately, we are all Chicagoans, which means that's our debt too, right? One of the things that they've done is they've hidden liabilities. So imagine, you know, you go to apply for a loan and somebody says, do you have any credit card debt? Yeah, I got $5,000 on this credit card. Oh, okay. Wait, what about that other credit card? I don't, never mind that other credit card. No, but you've got other debt on that other credit card. No, just here, $5,000 on this one. What bank would ever allow that to happen, right? You can't hide stuff. Well, that's what we've been doing. We've been hiding liabilities, we've been hiding debts, and one of the things that I've tried to do is kind of rip back that curtain and expose that debt. Why? Because you can't pay back a debt if you don't acknowledge what you actually owe, right? You can't say, well, I'm on this plane to pay back $5,000. Yeah, but you owe $25,000. I'm going to pay back the $5,000 though. It's not going to get you there, right? So I've been passing legislation to try and confront the Chicago pension crisis. Now I've got some good news on that. We didn't pass anything. You might be wondering, how is that good news? Well, the good news is that on the Sunday before the mayoral inauguration, I got a call from the mayor-elect, now the mayor. And he said, hey, can you talk to me about these pension bills? And I said, yep. How much time do you have? And he said, I want to know. And I said, okay. And so we started talking about it. And he said, I think I understand this stuff. And he said, but I have a favor to ask of you. And I said, what's that? He said, can you hold them? And I said, not likely. And he said, why? And I said, because this stuff needs to get done. And I said, Mr. Mayor, I said, let me tell you one thing about pensions that's really important to know. And I will tell all of you this, right? I've learned so much about pensions over the course of the last 11 years. There is one guaranteed truth. If paying back that debt is expensive today, and you say, could I have a day to find some money? I can't afford it today. Can I find some money? And you go out and you find some money tomorrow or next year, whatever you want to say. Let's say next year. You're going to find some new money, but that debt is going to grow faster than the money that you found. And typically what's happening in Illinois, politicians come in and they go, now it's really expensive. Could I have one more year? I'll go find some more money. And they come back and they say, I found some more money, and that debt's grown even faster. And now it's nearly impossible. And the next year it's impossible, and the year after that we're insolvent. Not exactly years like that, but you get the gist of it, right? And so I told him that. I said, it's time to confront these problems. And he said, I agree. And he said, but I need some time. I don't get inaugurated until tomorrow. I'm getting a new CFO, a new budget director, a new revenue director. Can I get my financial team in place? Can you give me a minute to get my head around these numbers? And I said, well, that's a big ask. But if we're going to do that, I have an ask of you. And he said, what's that? I said, number one, I don't want what the last mayor did, which was, can I look into it? And then she never did. I said, there's got to be an end, a closed end. And he said, what's the end? I said, veto session in November. He said, agreed. I said, we have to put together a working group of people who are actually going to look into the Chicago pension problem and solve it, because we are in big trouble in Chicago if we don't solve it. He said, agreed. And so for the first time in my elected history, we have a mayor who is willing to confront the problem, and he has no choice, unfortunately, because of what prior administrations have done. Confront the problem, acknowledge the realities of our debt, and put together real experts in a room to try and come up with a solution to it and act in a short period of time. That's very exciting for me. I've been working at this for 11 years to have willing partners in the executive branch. Cook County doing a great job, and now the new mayor of the city of Chicago willing to step up. I think that bodes really well for the future of Chicago. So I'm very excited about that. So that's it in pensions. I'll stop there. I know I bore people with pensions, but it's my thing. What can I tell you? All right, a couple pieces of other legislation I'll get on. Ride shares, Ubers, Lyfts, okay? I passed legislation this year that is going to change the way that our law governs the way that they operate. Now, what happened was, in 2015, 8 years ago, they came in, and there was no regulations on rideshare. We enacted rideshare regulations, and they lobbied for a change in the law that exempted them from something called common carrier liability. What is this? Well, if you go get into a taxi, that taxi, while you're there, owes you what's called common carrier liability. If you get on a bus, a plane, a train, a cruise ship, if you spend a night in a hotel, you have what's called common carrier liability protection. And that means if something happens to you, if you're injured in the care of those companies whose whole business model is to say, hey, come here and use my business and I'll take care of you, they owe you what's called the utmost care. They lobbied to be exempted from it. They said, oh, we're just a startup. We're just people sharing rides. You know, Joe's on his way down, and I say, oh, you're going downtown? Could you give me a ride? Well, you know that's not what rideshare has turned into. It's turned into a wholesale replacement of transportation, right? And they're big businesses. They're making billions of dollars. And what's happened is some really bad things. There was a woman, and this has happened multiple times, okay? More times than I care. But I'll give you one example that I'm aware of. And she is for the sake of all things public, Jane Doe. But I've met her. I've met Jane Doe. Her identity is being kept private. But Jane got into an Uber, went out with her friends, got into an Uber, and it's late at night. She's had a couple of cocktails. What happened while she was in the Uber on the long ride home? She nodded off, right? Guess where Jane woke up? In a desolate parking lot, zip-tied, and being brutally assaulted and raped by the driver.
Oh.
Okay? Now, Jane, you would think, could sue Uber. The law said no. The only person that Jane could sue was the driver. And let's be honest, what are you going to get from an Uber driver, right? You don't do that when you sue someone for that sort of harm. Again, if you're sleeping in a hotel room and someone comes in from the hotel, swipes a card key and has access to your room and assaults you, you sue the hotel. We were prohibited. So what this did was this removed that exemption, and now ride shares are subject to common carrier liability. Why is that important? Because when we get in the backs of ride shares, because that's how we get around these days. Who's hailed a cab lately? There aren't any, right? You want to get somewhere and you want a car, you hail an Uber, you hail a Lyft, and you get there. Now you have the same protections that you're entitled to, that you expect in that cab, that if something should happen to you, accidentally or intentionally, that you have a right to be made whole. And I think that's a really important consumer protection measure, and it's something I'm very proud of. So that was a big lift, we passed that. Couple of other things, and these are just sort of topical sort of stuff. We were supposed to do school board maps, district maps for the elected school board that's coming up. The process was delayed, and we are going to continue to work on it over the summer. As you can imagine, there was a lot of competing interests about how those maps should be drawn, and we just didn't get to an agreement, so that's been delayed, but we're still working on it. Good stuff yet to come. There was a couple of other bills that were kind of interesting. I'll just say this one and then I'll move on to the budget. This is something that my partner and your state representative Lindsay LaPointe worked on, which is mandating that all state regulated health insurance plans, they now must cover at least one mental health prevention or wellness visit per year for every person that's covered, right? Free. You get to go, and this is about removing those stigmas and creating access to mental health. We all know it's a rising issue in our society. It's led to crime, it's led to suicides, it's all sorts of problems. We need people to know that mental health is part of health, and people should feel free to access it, so this is one way of doing that. All right, let's move on to the budget, because the budget was some really good stuff this year. So I mentioned how in the prior administration we couldn't seem to agree on a budget. We had successive credit downgrades, and the state was in shambles, right? This is our fifth successive balanced budget in a row. We have paid down debts, and we have received 8 successive credit upgrades, which the state is really on a good path financially, and that's good. Don't get me wrong, we still have this massive pension debt that we have to deal with, but we're slowly but surely turning that cruise ship back in the right direction. And you know, that's it. This is a long game. If we can keep it on the right track, we'll be in good shape. So let's talk about it. It was balanced. It was agreed to, and again, it continues our path to fiscal responsibility. Education, very important, one of the primary things that we do. Some years ago, 2016, I want to say it was, we committed to increasing funding for education. We said that everyone in this state, every school children in the state should be entitled to a basic quality of education regardless of the zip code they live in. And so we revamped our funding formula. We came up with what's called the evidence-based funding that looks at what is the needs of a student and what is the capacity of the school district to meet those needs of that student financially, and then we distributed money accordingly. So we added, once again, another $350 million increase to K through 12 education, which is great. We worked on building a teacher pipeline through recruitment and retention funding, and we have the largest highest higher education increase in 2 decades. This is so important. Higher education is one of those things that everybody agrees on. You put $1 in, you get 12 out. So what did we do in Illinois? Let me repeat that. You put 1 in, you get 12 out. What did we do? We cut it, of course, right? It was like the dumbest thing ever. But we didn't have money. We're stuck in a budget struggle. And so successive cuts to higher ed. We're finally putting that money into higher education. This creates an educated workforce. It helps businesses want to come to Illinois. That is the #1 goal of businesses, is knowing that they can get good people to come and work for them. They can't do a business without it. So we increased in that. We increased early childhood funding for early childhood intervention. It's going to provide that every child in Illinois will have access to preschool, right? It's amazing, here in CPS we take it for granted, but there are a lot of areas of the state where they do not have preschool education. We made a big investment into, one of the big problems we have here, one of the things that Lindsay LaPointe has worked on a lot has been the issue of homeless, right? And it's really minor here compared to many other parts of the city, but it's not minor, it's a big issue. And we've made investments in that, $350 million total investment for crisis response efforts, $26 million to provide, this is the best one, I love this program ever since I started. So we increased by $26 million. Homeless prevention services. This identifies families that are like on the brink of homelessness, and we find out that if you can just get to them before they become homeless and give them a little intervention, give them a bridge gap, you have such incredible positive outcomes. It's really a worthwhile. So we're going to have 5,000 more families eligible for this program across the state, to prevent people from becoming homeless. $30 million for court-based rental assistance. Again, these are people that are about to be evicted. They have nothing left. They're going to be turned out on the streets. It's a way of courts to give them some sort of gap to get them back on the right track. Again, highly effective program. $155 million to support populations seeking shelter and services, $20 for rapid rehousing to 1,000 households, and $40 million for permanent supportive housing. Again, these are people who have emotional, physical, or maybe even chemical, like substance abuse needs. And so it's supportive housing. It's getting them into housing, addressing the problems that would otherwise make them homeless, helping to prevent it. Public safety. We added $1.05 billion to support public safety, totaling $6.3 billion. Much of this is going into tools to help prevent and solve crimes from happening. It's a big thing for mine. We seem to have this response model, and people always say, our response is, oh, I got robbed. I hope you catch the guy. And the model that we're working on is, let's keep you from getting robbed in the first place, right? And that's very basic, but that's the idea. That's where our investments are going. Prevention, but then also solutions. So we've been investing in crime lab technology, camera technology, again, so when they do happen, we know that they're going to get solved. We've done a lot in business attraction and development, $400 million for economic deals and to attract new businesses, $10 million clean energy career and tech ed pilot program to help high school kids, to help high schools develop curriculum and programming we're really investing in the electric vehicle manufacturing sector here in Illinois, and so this will help create jobs and give kids a pathways to those good jobs. $20 million to rebuild downtowns and main streets. Fiscal responsibility, I talked about that, really important. Again, I remember I'm the pension guy. A $200 million supplemental payment to our pensions beyond what was required. Again, what I talked about with Tony Preckwinkle, if it's not enough, put in some more, and that's what we're doing. That's the third successive year that we've added a supplemental payment. It's helped to reduce our long-term liabilities by $1.6 billion. To be fair, that really is kind of like a handful of sand off the beach, but it's a start. You keep going, right? It's like anything else, right? We all know this. It's like our households. It's not that tricky. You got a debt, you pay the debt, and you pay a little bit more until it's gone. So we're on the right path with that. Again, eight credit upgrades. We have this is amazing, right? So we were flat broke, and we owed $12 billion in current debt plus $140 billion in pension debt when Governor Pritzker took over. Over the last 5 years, we paid all of that debt off. We have no short-term or medium-term debt. Let me repeat that. Did you hear what I just said? Illinois has no short-term or medium-term debt. Yes, we still have our pension debt. That's going to take a while, but we're starting to solve those things. But on top of that, we now have $2 billion in what we call a budget stabilization or a rainy day fund. That is fiscal responsibility. You're putting money into an investment account, it grows, it's invested in the market, and if you have an economic downturn, instead of going, oh my God, cut education and raise everybody's taxes, you've got a little bit of a cushion. And we're going to continue to build that up. So it's really good fiscally responsible practice. Now, last couple of things I want to talk about. Representative LaPointe and I are very proud to say that as we have helped the state get back on the right fiscal track, guess what that does? That opens up room in your budget to address problems in your own local communities and to invest. And so we were able to obtain some budget support for what we think were really important needs. So budgetarily, we were able to obtain so this is like for current operating budgets. So there's two service providers around here that provide those human services, those social services for people who are in need. We don't have a whole lot here on the northwest side, but we're a pretty self-sufficient bunch. We've never really needed much, but what we do have, they need help. So we got $250,000 for the Polish American Association, which is in Six Corners. They don't just service Polish people. That's where they started back in the 1900 or so when they first started. They are anyone who is welcome, and of course they're doing a lot with the migrant crisis right now. $250,000 to Leiden Family Services, $500,000 operational grant to the Maryville Crisis Nursery, and this is a wonderful place. If you don't know anything about it, I'd have you look into it. Maryville, of course, you only need to say the word and you know they're doing good work. But the Crisis Nursery does two things. They have two parts of it. One is for families that are struggling, right? Just think a single mom, young person, who's at the end of her rope, and she's got that kid that's screaming, and she can't take it anymore, and she doesn't know what she's going to do, and we all know where this is going, right? Maryville Crisis Nursery says, stop, drop the kid off, go take a break, and whenever you come back, your child will be here and cared for. No questions asked. It's an intervention that is necessary for people that are about to break. We talked about this, and it is helping save and protect those children from harm. It's really a great thing, and they do great work. The other half of it, if you really want to have your heart broken, is go see this. Imagine children born with profound physical birth defects, right? Imagine a newborn infant strapped onto a table with a ventilator in its neck. And a parent who says, these days hospitals are like, okay, the baby's stable, here you go, here I go. How do I don't know what do I do? Maryville says, no problem, bring them here. We've got a dorm room for you here. You can stay here. And our team is going to take care of your child, and we're going to teach you as long as you need until you're comfortable caring for that child. I went and toured this, and you see these children of different ages, and you think, wow. And I mean, it's amazing, right? Let's say you need Medicaid for your child. Medicaid says 4 medicines a month is all you're entitled to. Some of these kids need 27. You have to submit a waiver every month for each medicine over 4. So they teach you how to go through that process so that you can care for your child properly. Now, you want to know the heartbreak? Sister Kathy took me around for a tour. And she takes me here, and she said, this is where we are here, and she shows me the different parts. And we walk to this one room, and we walk into this room, and I look around, and there's about 4 or 5 of these kids, but they're a lot older, right? They're like 7, 8, 9 maybe, and they're, in the chair with the ventilator. Most of them are profoundly, they're not communicative or whatever. And I looked around the room, and we stepped out and closed the door, and I said, Sister, sorry, I get emotional with this one. I said, who are those? And she said, oh, those are our kids. I said, what do you mean your kids? And she said, well, it's tough. sometimes the parents go home for the weekend and they don't come back. So there are kids. So that was, it was good to get them that money. They do good work. $335,000 went to Lutheran Social Services for homeless intervention here in the area. Again, we have a growing homeless problem, and we're trying to help address it. We're trying to get resources to help address that for everyone's benefit. $70,000 to the Senior Assistance Center. So those are the current operational. Last thing, and then I'm done, I promise, except for questions if anybody has them. Capital. One of the great things about being fiscal, I always say this when I talk, one of the worst debts, besides pensions, is when you don't maintain your infrastructure. Because what costs you $1 to fix today, costs you $10 tomorrow, costs you $25 the next, $100 the day after that. It's an exponential growth. You have to invest in repairing and maintaining your infrastructure. And again, Illinois had fiscal problems. We didn't do it. So we've passed an ongoing capital program, and we'll be able to get some of those capital dollars here. We've brought more than $16 million in capital investments in the last 4 years, more than $2.5 million for street surfacing, and in fact, $1.3 million of street resurfacing money was delivered to the 45th Ward through the Chicago Department of Transportation. Capital investment money that Representative LaPointe and myself were able to secure went right to the alderman's office, and he's using that money, $1.3 million above and beyond his menu money, to resurface streets in the 45th Ward, right? That's great when you can do that. We brought over $2.5 million in capital improvements to our Chicago public schools, and over $2 million to our Chicago parks, making improvements in the parks. The northwest side, especially the 38th Ward over here, is the number one ward in the city for the loss of tree cover due to disease or like gas line replacement. We've lost so many trees, so we were able to secure $200,000 to begin replanting those trees throughout the 38th Ward. Good for the environment, good for everyone, right? Over $900,000 to the RTA for infrastructure improvements over at the Irving Park, Blue Line and 90 entrance. That place is crazy. I walked around there and it's dirty, it's dangerous, it's crazy. So we're gonna put money into revamping that area and trying to fix that up a little bit. And then finally, one thing I'm kind of proud of, we have to do the nuts and bolts. It's always good to do the nuts and bolts. But the thing that always seems to get lost is a little culture. And we were happy to be able to get cultural grants for things like the Gift Theater and the Filament Theater to help them. They are really assets to our community. We were able to get capital money over to Patchkey to help them with their revamp over there with the National Veterans Art Museum coming in. And we got $300,000 that is going to go into, we've got down in Six Corners, you got the Filament Theater. You work your way up and you've got the Copernicus Center, which is a cultural and arts center. You've got the Gift Theater. You've got Patchkey Art Center, and so we've got $300,000 that will go into creating a permanent sculpture walk from Six Corners to Patchkey. And the idea being that we make this strip of Milwaukee Avenue that runs up and down our community as an attraction that we can promote, a cultural attraction. Come here, walk the art walk, visit the local restaurants, visit the community, right? Patronize our stores and our businesses. And I think it's a really good project. I'm working with Sid Smiley from Arts Alive Chicago to make it happen. And, those are some of the things that we've been able to deliver for our community and something that we're very proud of. So that's all the good news in the budget. Like I say, the bad news is there's a couple of things that didn't quite get done yet, but those are in the works and they'll be getting done soon. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
My question is on pensions.
Yes.
And the first question I have regarding pensions, historically within Chicago, what we've seen happen is someone has worked in a department that they did not get paid all that much and they had a low pension. At the end of their career, they were transferred to a different department and they would get this huge pension. CTA is a good example of that, where we saw that happen. Has that been changed at all?
Yeah, so there have been a lot of changes to pensions over the years to try and correct these problems. Unfortunately, those changes were, by the nature of them, they had to be for new hires, right? So what you're talking about is what we typically refer to as pension spiking. There have been safeguards put into place that your salary can only go up by a certain amount in your final years. But what really stopped that was the advent of what we call Tier 2 pensions. Tier 2 pensions have a cap. So the old pension system, Tier 1, every dollar you made was pensionable. Let me give you an extreme example. University of Illinois, one of the top universities in the country. Research professors, that's why, if you're a top university, you want research professors. How much do they cost you? $750,000 a year. Every dollar is pensionable. When they retired, 80% of $750,000. Now, pensions have a cap, and that cap is, and there's going to be a fix in this, but let's just say for sake of argument, it's about what the Social Security wage cap is. Okay, so you can get a pension for that first I think we're at like $160,000 of income, but after that, you stop making contributions. So if you make $250,000, you stop making contributions at $160,000, and that is the maximum pension you can get. So, and then there's other things that have been done to improve spiking too. So it used to be your highest 4 years, now it's the highest 8 of the last 10. When you think about that, that's a pretty dramatic thing. It's going to bring down your average salary, so it'll keep that spiking from happening.
I have one more in the way of pensions, and have there ever been any discussions going away from pensions and to more of a 401k type of structure?
Yeah, it has been talked about often, and what I would say is there's a good side and a bad side to it. The good side is that if you go into Social Security in a 401k, then once the money is put in, we're done, and there can't be any future problem, right? The downsides are double. First of all, employees, so 401ks have been an abject disaster on a macro sense in the private sector, meaning the vast majority of Americans are nowhere near prepared for their retirement, right? Because 401ks allowed too much self-control. And people didn't control themselves, and now they're coming into retirement, and they won't have the money, and guess what that means? That means they're going to lean on the government for benefits, and it's going to cost us in our budgets. So there's a downside to that. There's a risk to it that isn't, you say, well, we won't have debts, but if you have to pay for it later, it's a debt, right? It's one of those hidden debts. The other side of it is this. If you do it right, and if you do it responsible, a pension is way better of an investment for us, the taxpayer. If you're not a government employee and I want to pay for a government employee, then the best way to do that is a pension. It's cheaper, you get better results, and they get better benefits. Our problem isn't the pension system, it's that we've abused it. We've made irresponsible decisions. Just a quick example. What do you as a private citizen pay into your Social Security? 6.2%. What does your employer pay into your Social Security? 6.2%. If you have a 401k and you've got a safe harbor match, your employer's kicking in, they're kicking in another 3. So by my account, that's you put in 6.2 and your employer puts in 9.5, right? Or 9.2, excuse me, 9.2%. Currently, for Tier 2 pensions, our cost to provide a Tier 2 pension, which is roughly equivalent to Social Security, is somewhere between 2% and minus 2%. Teachers in the state of Illinois under a Tier 2 pension are actually subsidizing our government because what they put in to their pension more than covers the benefit they'll get out. That's how efficient pensions can't be if they're managed correctly. What we have now is not a bad pension system. In fact, some would argue it's too austere, which is why we can't hire police officers and teachers.
But here's the flip side though. But with a 401k, especially if they're Roth-based, you pay the taxes up front. When you take it out when you retire, you're paying no taxes on it. So you're really not paying any taxes on it. And you're right, you have to put it into a fund that does grow over time. And you cannot manipulate it. You got to put it in and just let it go with it. That's the key right there.
Yes, but on a macro sense, where 401ks have been used in the private sector, you have employees that have stopped contributing. The market goes down, they take their money out, which is the dumbest thing in the world. They take loans away from, oh God, I ran into some trouble, I'm gonna take a loan. They go and they retire and they've got $25,000 and it's gone in a year. And so that's a bad thing. Now, you're right, if you do it right, I have a 401k in my law office, if you do it right, if you put the money and you don't touch it, works really well. But what we've seen is, that's not what people do. And so, again, to me, from my position, what I want is I want a government that's responsible and protects future taxpayers. If we do a responsible pension system and we supplement it with like a 401k style, and we have that, we have in government it's a 457. So we have a pension system, you supplement it with a quality deferred comp, and you get people prepared for their retirement, then they won't be a burden on future generations, right? Let me tell you another thing about, and I'm really into this retirement security, so forgive me, but let me tell you the downside of that. Remember what I said about people not being prepared? There's a huge sector of our economy that's driven by people who are retired spending the money they've saved. If nobody saves anything, they're not spending anything, and our economy suffers. Again, for me, if I can help people be more prepared for their retirements, never mind me, it's too late for me, but my kids will have it better off, and that's kind of my focus, you know. Yes?
Can't we also have the government stop borrowing from the pension fund?
So,
That's the problem.
yeah, and so to be fair, once the money is put into the pension, you can't borrow from it. When they say that, what they mean is they're not actually making a sufficient contribution, right? So that's the way government borrows from it, is they said, well, how much do we have to make a payment? Oh, let's say $1 million. Well, but I want to spend that money elsewhere. All right, put in $500,000. We'll pay more later. That's the bad decision they've made, yeah. Yes, sir. Either one. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Well, what do you think about what the budget for higher education? I in higher education right now. I in higher education. What the budget for?
Oh, higher education. Yes, thank you, thank you. So we put in a lot of money towards higher education. One of the big things that we did was we increased what's called need-based scholarship funding. And this is helping people who are middle class, working class, and poor, who are eligible to go to college but can't afford it, need-based, have the resources they need. We always underfunded that for years. In fact, during the budget impasse, that was the thing that broke my heart the most. There were all these kids who were in college, in the middle of their college careers, and they came to me and they said, I lost my MAP grant, I can't afford to go back to college. Oh, it just devastates you to think that you're taking away the opportunity for a kid to get an education. We are now fully funding MAP grants. We're providing MAP grants to more students that need them than ever before. So it's a really good thing. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry.
How bad on it? So you students that do math. How bad on? How the student gonna know math? They don't know equation. Oh, how the student is student debt?
Student debt?
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. Well, we have done some work on student debt, and again, creating affordable opportunities for college helps reduce student debt. There's not much we can do about the people that have it. We've done some things to make sure that there aren't predatory lending practices and that students have the ability to pay those down, but we're trying to go forward making college more affordable, so. Yes, sir.
I was going to say, and also with private 401ks, there's always a Bernie Madoff around the corner.
Yep.
Anyway, what is the current situation that is, from your vantage point, of the unhoused situation in Chicago and in Illinois? We're talking about turning a corner on the pension crisis, but what about the unhoused, homeless situation? What do you see happening now?
So it's a big issue. It's a big issue, and it's growing. It's a growing problem. And what I do see is I see the first good step, which means it finally has the attention of government, and we're now starting to dedicate resources towards solving that problem and understanding that, I like most problems, maybe when it takes a while before we actually understand where it comes from and how it happens. And we're starting to realize that so much of this is tied in together. Mental health, addiction, there are problems that need to be addressed, and simply saying, get a job. Well, that doesn't do anything, right? And so we're beginning to start to understand that we need intervention, we need outreach, we need services, and we need stability for these people. And when we do that, we have great results. To be fair, there are certain people that you just know that their problems are too profound. We can't solve all of them, but we can solve a big enough chunk of it to make a difference, and we finally have the kind of investment into that. $350 million of state funds are going to go right into this sort of addressing this problem. Most of that's going to come up here. It's not that there aren't homeless problems throughout the state, but obviously the majority of it's here in Chicago, some of the other major metropolises. But think about this. There are over 100,000 homeless school children in the state of Illinois. Think about that. 100,000 homeless school children. And there are good programs that work. We're finally making investments in them to grow them, capitalize, and serve the increased need. So hopefully we'll make some progress. Yes, ma'am, you had your hand up there for a while. Cynthia.
You're the new privileged class in America. You're the only ones left with pensions, all the public employees all over the United States. And also, why was Governor Blagojevich allowed to take some of the pension money and divert it to run the state? The state of Illinois Constitution says clearly it cannot be reduced, it can't be, I guess, touched. Why was he allowed to do that? And why did the state representatives and state senators go along with him? He did a lot of damage.
He sure did. There's a long history of bad decisions that have been made regarding pensions, and I would say it is a bipartisan problem. Blago is kind of easy because he was such a weirdo, so he's easy to poke fun at. He got elected in 2002, and he promised, I am, and it's the best promise any politician ever makes. I swear to God, I'm not going to raise taxes. And they eat it up, right? Yeah, he said no taxes. And he gets elected, and he goes, we're broke. And so you had a big...
In America, you feel the pulse of the people, you tell them what they want to hear.
Yep.
You have name recognition and unlimited bank accounts, and I guarantee you, you will be in office.
Well, he got elected, and the decision that he made, in conjunction with the General Assembly back in 2004, I think it was that they would skip a pension payment. They took a pension holiday. I love that, holiday, like you're on the beach, pina colada, getting your toes in the sand. It did a lot to harm us. It wasn't the only problem. This problem has been going on for years. 1995, we created what was called the Edgar Pension Ramp, which said, you know what we'll do? Even though we owe like $2 to $3 billion a year, we'll just pay $1 billion a year for 15 years, and then we'll naturally let the payments grow later. And then in 2010, that's when we hit this massive crisis. So there have been bad decisions all along, really poor financial decisions. In terms of what you're saying, the Constitution says that the benefit earned by the employee shall not be reduced. There's no obligation for us to pay that, but it's financially irresponsible if we don't. Right, that's the big key, is getting your elected officials and your politicians to be fiscally responsible. Remember that pension holiday I talked about that Blagojevich took? You want to know a better one? In 1995, Richard M. Daley went to the General Assembly and said, I want full and total control of the Chicago Public Schools.
Yeah.
I want full control. You let me handle it. And as part of it, he got the law changed. There used to be, on your property taxes, there was a chunk that was collected for the operation of the schools, and there was a chunk that got collected and went right into the pension fund. Pretty responsible, right? He eliminated that. And he said, I'll decide how much to make. So guess how much of a pension payment he made in 1995, the first year he took office, since he got to decide. Want to guess? Zero. 1996?
Zero?
1997? 98? 99? 2000? 2001? 2002? 2003?
Every year?
2004. The first pension payment that Richard M. Daley and Paul Vallis made into the Chicago Teacher Pension Fund was 10 years after they took control of the schools. They skipped pension payments for a decade. Well, you know, I wasn't there then. I just know the history. And
But they had right together, the union and the mayor.
right,
Must have been to spring that off.
look, it's a lot of bad decisions. And look, here's the important thing. Not what happened. Because guess what? I can grab Paul Vallis and Rich Daley and shake them by their ankles. It's not enough to cover the debt. So the most important thing is that we learn from what happened, and we make sure it doesn't happen going forward in the future.
Yeah, he also went ahead and got rid of trades within the Chicago Public Schools, too.
Yes, sir.
I've discussed this with a number of my union retiree friends, and we've got a chuckle out of this, and that is, I will be happy to put $1 in to reduce my state pension for every dollar I get back from my Social Security that was taken away from me
Yeah.
through the windfall elimination provision.
Thank you.
I'll make you a deal, okay?
Yeah.
I will put $1 in to help solve this problem, but I want $1 back from the Social Security that was taken away from me.
Yep, yep. Yeah, it's a big issue. And look, it's, again, you know, this is the fun part, right? We can look back at the bad decisions that were made and say, holy moly, what were they thinking? And again, you can criticize, you can blame, I don't know what they were thinking, I wasn't there. And in fact, when I got in, I was like, oh my God, look at this mess. And my focus was from the very beginning I got there, I'm like, acknowledge the realities of the debt, find a reasonable solution to pay for it, and let's put our state on a better track. And like I said, there's been some progress that's been made. But one place that there hasn't been progress made is the city of Chicago. Just for reference, I talked about how good Cook County is. They're about 70% funded. Yes,
That's my pension.
there you go.
Nice.
All right, so in the pension world, people would go, that's not very good. You should work on that. The state of Illinois and the Chicago Teacher Pension Fund, mid-40s. In the state of Illinois, we go, oh, they're actually pretty good. In the pension world, they go, oh my God, that's atrocious. Anybody want to gander at what the Chicago pensions are funded at? Who knows? On average. How much?
40.
I'll get you in 1 second. Anybody want to guess?
I think it's
not-
closer to 60.
Well, if it's worse, then.
The four Chicago municipal pension funds. The best one is the laborers, which is the smallest funded. That's at about 40%, but it is so small, it's almost insignificant.
Oh, wow.
Okay? The next smallest is the firefighter pension fund. They're currently at 16% funded.
1-6?
1/6.
I just want to make sure I heard that.
Then there's the police officer pension fund, which is, and I'm guessing here, because the last numbers they show are the end of '21, and we know that, '21 and '22 was a bad year, right? So in end of '21, they were 22% funded. I'm gonna guess they're 20% funded as the police. And then the largest fund is the Municipal Employees Fund, which houses all of the frontline workers of the city of Chicago and the non-teachers in the Chicago Public Schools. And they are about 20% funded, but they are like on a downslide like this. So Chicago's in bad shape, and that's why it's time to get Chicago in on the right track. Yes, sir, I'm sorry. Thank you for being patient.
Okay, I live in very gentrified neighborhood. My neighborhood is very gentrified, and I think to myself, how am I afford this rent
How do you afford the rent
in very gentrified neighborhood?
in gentrifying neighborhoods? Yeah, that is an area where I am not an expert, right? That is a certain problem that we have where people have been longtime residents. One of the things that they're talking about is as neighborhoods improve and values go up and people start to get pushed out of their homes, they talk about things that are there to protect longtime residents, longtime resident homeowners exemptions, so that property taxes on rising values don't force you out of your homes. There are things like that that are out there. There is a lot of talk of expanding them because there are certain neighborhoods in Chicago that seem to get hot, and people that have lived there their whole lives, even generations, are forced out of their homes. But it's a very good question. Again, I'll talk pensions until the cows come home. I'm not an expert on that, so.
My neighborhood become right now my mom want to make my rent up to $1,800. And I think I'm gonna walk, and I think to myself, oh shoot, I need to move out my current neighborhood. Because by my neighborhood, because half the people in my hood are disabled on Social Security. Half the people in my neighborhood have been passed out. Half the people in my neighborhood have been passed out.
Passed out?
Passed out.
Priced out. Thank you very much. Yes, that does happen, and it's an interesting thing that happens in the city as neighborhoods shift and they become popular and people want to buy. Again, not really my strong suit, but we do a lot in Chicago and Cook County with exemptions to try and help people stay in their homes. We have a homeowner's exemption, we have a longtime homeowner's exemption, we have a senior exemption, and for those seniors on limited incomes, we have a senior freeze, we have a disabled veterans exemption. Yes, sir.
Can I offer my idea of what would help us? Is we need to redirect investment, the exuberance of the developers. I know it's the private sector, but we need to reinvest in some areas of the city that have been underinvested in for decades.
Yep.
We need to go back and we need to build these. We've got 2 shuttered CTA stations on the blue line on the west side. 2 shuttered, they've been shuttered for years.
Yeah.
They're ready to be reactivated. Let's put some housing around there. You've got young people, millennials, and then the generation after the millennials, they would just be dying to just get into these houses that would be built around some of these, and it's inexpensive land out there. We need to reinvest in the west side and the south side.
I agree.
And take the burden off neighborhoods like ours to constantly have to be built up because they're already halfway in good shape. And, it's money chasing money up here. But we need to stop with the money chasing money, and we have to have money chasing need.
Yep.
So, I
I agree.
So,
I know I've talked a lot. Was there any last question? Can I do one last one?
yeah, let's do.
Who here, you pick.
Oh, right, I'll pick you.
I just want to know, he said there's a budget for crime is that for all of Illinois or just Chicago?
Yeah, so we're currently spending $6.3 billion in Illinois. So it goes throughout the state of Illinois. Obviously, there is crime prevention and criminal justice and police dollars that get spent in Chicago, in Cook County, in local municipalities. It's what the state adds out of state money into that. Most of that has been technology to help police officers solve crimes. We've done mental health treatment for police officers. We got $10 million for mental health for police officers. Again, very, very difficult job. A lot of police officers, you see rising suicide rates. It's become a problem. People are unable, we see a lot of PTSD with police officers. So attending to police officers' mental health recruitment and retention. Another problem is we have a shortage of police officers, and the police officers who do have are forced to work ridiculous hours, have their shifts canceled. So money goes into, we identify those problems and we invest in solving those things. Yes.
All right, so,
Why is the mayor taking the lighting system, the tracking system for the shots that are getting fired?
Shot spotter?
Yeah, why is he taking that away when that's something that everybody says is supposed to help? If there's money for the budget, why is he taking that out?
So, and forgive me, I'm not a city elected official, and that's a city decision, so that would be a question for any of your aldermen and the mayor himself or anyone in the city government. So that's, I do the stateside sort of stuff, so I apologize, I don't have an answer for that.
no, you've given us a very good briefing on what's going on, I appreciate it. And I see Peter over there put some fresh coffee out, so if somebody wants some fresh coffee and treats her in luck.
Peter, I like the coffee you make. You can stand your spoon in that. That's good coffee. That's the way I like it. I'll be up for a while.
Thank you.